Okay. Okay, so today we're learning chapter 5 of Tanya. We're starting chapter 5. So anyways, I'm saying it's really amazing that everybody's coming here, even without getting any certificate at the end, any profession at the end, any money. No one's telling us to come. And we're still all here and learning. Even though we're busy, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're here. Each of you took the time to come here and learn. So what makes you want to leave everything and come here and learn? The truth, like what actually, what is the reason?
It's me to me. I'm making present from myself, from me to myself.
A present for yourself.
Yeah. In the both way of the present, that I am present and it's as a matana.
Beautiful. Present.
Yeah. I find it's necessary.
You see that it's necessary.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing. Sophie, Yafa?
I agree. It's necessary. It's knowledge. It's on everyday life, what we're learning. It's things that we're using and we're doing.
Right. It's our life.
This is the way of life.
Yeah.
Tanya, I would like to add something.
Yes,
also
sure.
The student, when the right teacher will arrive, the student will be ready, right? So it has to do with you, I guess. Also.
Okay, thank you.
A little bit, I guess.
Thank you. No, but you're basically finding something here that gives you something good for your life, right?
For my neshama, not my life.
Neshama for yourself, yeah. It's filling up your neshama, definitely. And we'll see today exactly how and what. So we're gonna see. So the class today, the part of the Tanya that we're learning, is gonna deal with this question: why is it so important to come to the class and learn Torah? So we're gonna see why. Generally, we're gonna first talk about learning in general, and why people in general want to learn and what's motivating people to learn, etc. And then we're going to see what's so special about learning Torah. In order to understand the value of learning Torah, we have to go back and understand the value of learning and the value of education in general. So education, generally speaking, is a big part of life. Okay, from when we're born, we learn about life, we get to know people, like even little kids, right away we tell them this is this person, this is that person, we teach them the colors, we teach little kids the different sounds, and then we spend a lot of time, hours and hours in school, like from age 3 till 18, kids spend hours most of their day in school and learning, and even after we graduate as adults, millions of adults join different learning groups for different reasons. So even in the modern world, we see that education is very central. Like people, there's like, it's very, very, like people want to learn. And even more interesting than that is that the level of education defines the country, the level of the country. Like if there's a high level of education, it's considered a more developed country. If there's barely any education or there's no schools or whatever, then it's considered an underdeveloped country, right? And even the people themselves, like we are, if we have a high level of education, we are considered like a higher rank of person, right? Like the education really defines a lot in the world. So we could have thought that education is just for the job, but it's not only that. The kids don't learn for the job, and a lot of adults don't necessarily learn. What they learn is not necessarily connected to their job. Like and sometimes you can even go to university and learn a lot and not end up doing that specific job. But even like that, like a lot of adults like to take different courses and like to learn, not even necessarily for a job. So what does education give the person? Why is education and learning so significant in life? Why people learn, even if it's not really bringing them much? Like
well, if you talk in actuality, it's to have a job, to have a degree, to have that. But what we're learning in your class, it's different in my eyes, because you get something that fits your soul, that you live with it. It's me, I'm born to it.
Okay, so here you definitely see
It's
the
different.
difference. But what about there's people in the world that are learning for neither a job and neither coming to a Torah class for their soul. Like there's learning. Why do
Life,
people
the
learn?
life is constantly changing. Everything is changing around. If you want to, like, we will be able to catch up like to our kids, right? But at least to be aware of or try to understand better.
Yes.
It's a personal growth. Not everybody is going to learn. Not everybody going back to school. I don't know.
It's the world change. The world is changed too.
You do know lots of people who like living in the past, and it doesn't mean this was better or worse. Something was much better than now. Don't get me wrong, right? But it's a personal growth.
Yes.
You might open it, but you wanted to You wanted to be open-minded.
So it does expand our knowledge. It expands our way of seeing the
Or
world.
also
Like it helps us.
understanding. So the same thing, maybe also different you learn something, like I see one way and you see differently. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Doesn't mean it's my way, it's right way, your way, it's the wrong way.
So it's interesting. It's
It's
interesting.
also open mind. And some of the like things you can maybe bring into your own everyday life or not. It's just like a support group.
Yeah.
I look at it as a
Yeah,
support.
yeah. So that's definitely a big reason, like to learn, like whatever, to see each other, to see the world better in a different eye, to see different views, to have each other, to connect with others, and also different stuff. Like there's all like different types of learning can give us different tools, can give us different knowledges, whatever. There's always more to learn.
But it changed every year. It does change.
Yeah, there's also changes
And
that we
the
need to keep up
learning
with.
is
Exactly.
changing, and you have to keep
The
up
learning's changing too.
with the world, whatever
Yes.
it's going on.
So it's to
This
keep
is
up
why
with
people
the world.
study. Yes.
Okay. So there we see that there's different reasons that make education something significant, and that's why people learn. And today we're gonna see one thing that education gives the person that nothing else can give him. It's the fact that when we learn something, it penetrates inside the person. It designs who we are. Like when we learn something, it becomes part of us. It becomes part of who we are. It develops us from inside. So what happens is that when we want to learn a piece of information, in the beginning, the piece of information is separate from us. It's two separate things. There's me and my mind, and there's the piece of information. And as soon as the piece of information, I'm learning it and I'm understanding it, the information goes inside my mind and it becomes a part of me. For example, if a person learns a math equation, the second he understands the second he grasps the idea, it becomes part of his mind. It's logic and it's part of his thinking. It becomes him. So of course, sometimes people hear stuff, it goes in one ear, goes in the other ear. If you're not interested, you're not learning and nothing's going in. But if you're interested and you want to learn and you're learning something and you are absorbing it, it goes in and becomes part of us. So there's a few steps. There's a process from when the external information goes inside of us and it becomes a part of us. Okay, so I said in the beginning, there's two pieces. So the learning process goes like that. The first step is the initial absorption. There's a step where the person becomes aware that there's a new idea. There's a new piece of knowledge. Okay, I'm hearing it, I'm reading about it, I'm seeing something. Okay, and then I'm processing it. The mind processes the new idea, the new piece of knowledge, and he's thinking about it, he's judging it, he's looking for questions and finding answers till he gets convinced about this idea. And he understands the idea completely, like it's getting more and more inside of him. And the last step is when after he understood, the person identifies himself with the idea and he's internalizing the idea, and he internalizes the whole understanding of this, and the whole understanding becomes a part of him. It becomes a part of him. So at the end of the process, so in the beginning, I said there was two pieces. It was the person and the piece of knowledge. And at the end, the knowledge that came from outside came inside the mind of the person and became a part of him. Do you see that? That's why knowledge has a huge influence on the person. The knowledge, the pieces of information that we're absorbing from different places, it designs who we are. It actually affects the way we think. It affects the way we see things, okay? It affects the way we look at things, depending on what we were convinced and what we were reading about. So what we learn, it's like it designs the glasses that we're looking at the world through those glasses. So in a way, after you learn something, you're not the same person that you were before, because you see the world a little bit differently, right? We said that the world is changing and we're learning new pieces of information to so we're like developing together with the world changing. So we every time we learn something, we're like a newer person, we're changing. So think about it, like when you come to this class, does it change your view on the world? Does it change the way you see yourself, the way you live your life? I can tell you about myself, like I'm really enjoying this learning. And like when all the work that we did before the Tanya, that we did with your awesome self, for example, like about really understanding that Hashem designed my neshama and I'm perfect no matter what. And there's so much going on the outside, like everything is fake. Everything that people say to me about me, that's not the truth. The truth is Hashem designed me and I'm a perfect person. So when I live by it, and the more I learn about it and the more I talk about it, I live by it, and the more I feel calm during all my interactions during the day and everything that happens, because nothing affects me as badly. So all the learning becomes who we are. Do you see it with yourself, with anything that you learned? Any example of something you learned and you see that it changed, that it really affected you and it changed your view, it changed... Elaine, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel that after the classes, there's always something that I take into life that I think about during the week. It's hard for me to give a specific example, but it's there. So I'm working on it.
So it makes you work on things. It makes you see things differently throughout the week after.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you see that when you learn something, it becomes a part of you and it changes how we see things. That's the idea.
Yeah, it's internalized.
Yeah. So this idea of getting it and it becomes a part of us, in the Zohar, in the Kabbalah, there's a word for it. The Zohar calls it tfisa. Tfisa in Hebrew is to grasp, to catch an idea. Like you're not just like hearing something, but you're grasping it. You're like getting a hold of it. So there's the Eliyahu Hanavi that wrote an introduction to the Zohar, and he says, late machshava bach tfisa, whatever tfisa, meaning that there's no thought that catches you. So we use the term to catch. It's like, you know, when we learn, we use the term I got it, like you get it, like, or I didn't get it. Because it's not just I didn't understand, it's about getting it. It becomes something more inside, like it's getting caught. In Hebrew, it sounds really good. It's like tafasti or lo tafasti. Like I got it, I didn't get it. Or sometimes you say the bilti nitfas, can't even catch it. So what's the connection between learning and the concept of catching, of tfisa? Usually when you catch something, you're catching an object, right? It's but here we're talking like it's when we catch like the word catching is usually used for an object that you catch with your hands. But education, learning, it's abstract. So what does it mean to catch a piece of knowledge? So that's the whole idea here, is that the way the hands catch an object, we surround it from all sides. Like I'm holding the pen, I'm catching it, I'm surrounding it from all the sides. The same thing, when we learn something, the mind catches the idea and wraps it from all sides until it stays inside the mind, like we caught it and it stays inside forever. So we have the idea that the mind catches this idea, this new piece of information, But at the same time, the education, the piece of knowledge also catches the mind. So the mind catches the knowledge and the knowledge catches the mind, because when we learn something, we need to concentrate, right? And when we're in the middle of learning, the learning catches the entire thinking. It catches the whole mind. The whole mind needs to be concentrated into the learning. And if we stop concentrating, we can't understand it. So from here, we see that the education, like the learning, catches the thought and the mind when the person is learning. So the learning catches the mind, and also the mind catches the learning. You see that? So we're going to see that now in the Tanya, how the author of the Tanya is focusing on the word tfisa, from the Zohar, from the Kabbalah. And he says it comes from the words of Eliyahu and Navi in the Zohar. And he explains that when a person learns a piece of knowledge, on one hand, the mind catches the piece of wisdom, the piece of knowledge, and on the other hand, the piece of wisdom is catching the concentration and the mind in that moment. Like the mind catches the piece of knowledge, and the learning catches the whole person's concentration. And he's going to bring the Alter Rebbe in the Tanya. We're going to see he brings an example that when a person learns a piece of halacha, before he learned it, the piece of halacha was two separate things. There was the law in the book, and there was the mind of the person learning. And after the person learned it, he looked into it, he processed the details, he understood it. Then the halacha, the piece of law of the Torah law that he learned, the piece of law went from the book to the person's mind. Now it's part of the person's mind. You know how when things become part of our mind, we sometimes even forget where we learned it from, sometimes we forget where we heard it. Like we know stuff and we don't remember where we learned it, who told it to us, because it really became a part of us that we don't even know the source. That tells us how much it's like it becomes a part of us. So let's see it in the word of the Tanya. Yes, second. I'll share my screen. Okay. So Perek Hey. This is the beginning of the 5th chapter. A further explanation to more fully elucidate the expression tfisa, to grasp, that the words of Eliyahu, no thought can grasp you. Okay, so we're going to explain this idea of tfisa of the mind. When any intellect perceives and understands some intellectual subject, the mind grasps that subject and encompasses it. Okay, so here the mind grasps the piece of knowledge, the subject, and the subject is grasped and encompassed by and is closed within the intellect that understood it and perceived it. Okay, so that's on one hand, and also the intellect is closed within the subject at the time of intellectual comprehension and grasping. So also the mind is caught by the knowledge. It's like a twofold thing. And now he gives the example of the halacha. When, for example, one understands and comprehends a particular halacha in the Mishnah or Gemara clearly and thoroughly through strenuous application of his mind, his intellect grasps and encompasses that halacha, and his intellect is also closed in it at that time when he strives to understand it. Okay, so hopefully you understood this first piece that's explaining how the mind is grasping and how it's the mind is encompassing and grasping the new piece of knowledge, and the knowledge is grasping the entire mind because it's using the whole concentration of the mind, and it becomes part of the person. I have a story about the idea that the learning becomes part of the person and it becomes part of the way of thinking. There was once an argument between the sages, and somebody quoted a pasuk, he quoted a certain commentary from the commentary called Baal HaTosfot. And one of the rabbis sitting there said, no. There's no such a commentary. It's impossible. The Baal HaTosfot never wrote that. And they checked, and they actually saw that he was right. There was no such a commentary from Baal HaTosfot. So they asked him, how do you know so well all the commentary of all the Baal Tosfot commentaries. You know it so well that you know that this is not in all his commentaries. He says, I don't remember all his commentaries, but I know his style of learning, and I know that this doesn't fit. This thing that you quoted does not fit his style of teaching. So it's really like grasping the whole idea of the person. And that's why, like, if it's outside of you, you don't fully get it, but if it's inside of you, you fully get it. So now we understood the value of learning, that it penetrates inside the person's mind and it develops him from inside. Now we're going to see the additional value of learning when we're learning Torah. So for that, we need to understand what's the Torah and where it comes from. I have 1 second. I have a little, very cute joke. There was basically a wedding, and they hired this bus driver. And wait 1 second. Yeah, they hired the bus driver for a wedding, and they told him if he comes late to the wedding, they're not paying him. Anyways, he's picking up all the guests from different places, and it was in the winter, and there was a snowstorm, and the snowstorm made him completely delayed, and he came late and he didn't get paid, but he was very upset. He says, you have to pay me. And he took them to the rabbi and he said, how come they're not paying? I still worked. So the rabbi said, listen, they made up in advance that if it was made up in advance that you're not going to get paid if you come late, then that's the deal. Too bad. So he said, where does this come from? Like, where are you taking this halacha from? So he says, I'm taking it from the Torah. It's like, I'm a rabbi, I'm taking it from the Torah. And he says, where was the Torah? When was the Torah given? Torah was given on Mount Sinai. When was the Torah given? The Torah was given in the spring, because it's Shavuot. So he says, you know what? When the Torah was given in the spring, it didn't fit. Like that your halacha works only for the spring. Now it's the winter. They didn't take into account, this law didn't take into account that this happened in the winter. The rabbi told him, listen, the weather does not change the halacha. So it's very important to know where the halacha comes from and not make changes to it. So and we know that Torah doesn't happen, but Torah deals with every single part of life. It deals with every question in life, and it also deals with modern technology. The rabbi can get all types of questions. It can get you could get questions about car accidents. Who should pay for there was a car accident, who should be paying for it? He also gets questions about what happens if there's a drop of milk that fell in the pot of meat soup. And he also gets a question of, can we use electronics on Shabbat? Even though the Torah was given so many years ago. 1 second, I want to make quiet here. Give me a second. Okay. So the rabbi gets all types of questions, even modern questions, like can we use electronics on Shabbat? So that's just the beginning. So where does the rabbi take all the answers to all the questions? Like the Torah was given so many years ago, and today we have like a lot of developments. How does it work? So we know that the rabbi does not answer based on his own opinion. Okay, and he goes based on, and he also doesn't go based on what seems moral to him. He doesn't go based on, he doesn't put his mind and his ideas inside. Every single answer that a rabbi gives to every question is based in the Torah. Okay, when the rabbi hears a question, he needs to look at the sources in the books, and he gives an answer based on the Torah, based on the words of God given to Moshe at Mount Sinai. So it's hard to see really like how it went from all the way from Mount Sinai till today that the rabbi answers questions. So I want to give you a little bit of a background. It's like a pyramid of where the Torah came from and how it developed until today, so that we know that I want you to see how today all the pieces of Torah, where do they all originate from? And then we need to know that in order to understand the value of Torah. So there's a few stages from when the Torah was given until today. So the first stage is when the Torah was given. Hashem gave the Torah Mount Sinai. He gave 613 mitzvot to Moshe at Mount Sinai, and he gave him the written Torah with 613 mitzvot. And also, Hashem gave at the same time to Moshe the oral Torah. The oral Torah is all the explanations and the details of the mitzvot. So the Torah is very basic, let's put it that way, and all the explanation and how to do a mitzvah, Hashem taught it to Moshe orally. He said it orally, it wasn't written. And then Moshe taught all those explanations to the Jews. I'm just going to give you just an example for you to understand, but like the Torah says, you should wrap around your hand, tefillin. What should you wrap? What color should it look like? What material should it be? What's the shape and form of it? Like the way that tefillin looks like today, like those black boxes with the black strings, all that is in the oral Torah. The Torah only says, like you should wrap it around your hands. So all the details of the mitzvot are in the oral Torah. The oral Torah is as important as the written Torah. So basically, it went from generation to generation that Moshe taught it to the Jews, and the Jews taught it to their children and to their children. That's what they were learning. They were learning and passing on the oral Torah. For 1,500 years, the oral Torah went from mouth to mouth through the sages and students that learned in yeshiva. And the sages also translated. They translated all the principles that they heard from Moshe, and they wrote it. Like they didn't write it, but they modernized it, like based on different situations. They explained it even more and even more. Now, after the second temple was destroyed, came a Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, and he put together all the laws and all the halachot that came until then, and he wrote everything. He saw that it's like not going to last forever orally. He wrote everything in the Mishnah. Okay, so the Mishnah is a summary of the whole oral Torah. Rabbi Yonasi wrote it. So now we have the Mishnah written. And after the Mishnah was written, the Mishnah is a short version, okay? It's a summary of all the oral Torah. Then came the sages, and they decided to detail everything. They wrote all the details of the Mishnah, and that's the Talmud. So the Talmud was written. There was a Talmud Yerushalmi from Yerushalayim, and a Talmud from outside of Israel, Talmud Bavli. And all these are commentaries on the Mishnah, okay? A lot of commentaries. And then came the Rishonim. It's like a lot of, it's a period of a lot of rabbis. They explained the Talmud even further. And then they also wrote, after there's a lot of arguments and commentaries and everything, they wrote the final halacha. So we have a few rabbis that wrote the halacha, the way we should actually do all the mitzvot. And we have the Rambam that wrote all that. In the 14 books of the Rambam, there's the Rosh and there's the Rif. They wrote halacha. And then came major Rabbi Yosef Karo. Everything that was written until then, he took everything from the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh, like they wrote all the halacha, and he summarized it into a Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. Okay, it's a summary of all the laws. He took all the different opinions and he picked the best opinion based on what he thought. And then there was another rabbi after him, the Ramah. He added the map, and there was then came the whole the Ashkenazi Shulchan Aruch, and all the Jews received this Shulchan Aruch. Okay, since then, so the Shulchan Aruch was like a base of all the Code of Jewish Law, and then since then, tons of books are being written to decode and discuss the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, so now what we see in summary, the role of the sages of every generation, it's not to make up new laws or halacha, but they are taking Hashem's words from Mount Sinai that was given, and they're explaining it into how we do it in this world, okay, like into this modern world, into this existence of this world. They're explaining how we should do the same Torah. That's why everything written in books of Torah, everything that's written, it's all from the same Torah, from the words of Hashem back on Mount Sinai. All the books of Torah, the Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah and the Talmud, everything, and all the commentaries that are happening today, more and more and more, all the rabbis, whatever they write, everything originates in the words of the Torah that comes from God. Now, hopefully you see a little bit of a better picture, but now we can understand what happens to us when we learn Torah. When we said that when we said that when a person learns anything, the knowledge, the new piece of knowledge penetrates the mind and becomes a part of him, right? So everything in the Torah is Hashem's wisdom. So when we learn and we understand the Torah, Hashem's wisdom is penetrating inside of us and becomes a part of us. Everywhere we go, we're walking around with Hashem's wisdom inside of us, and it's penetrated forever inside of us. So when a person learns halacha, learns code of Jewish law, and he understands it with his mind, he's basically catching and grasping Hashem's wisdom. 1 second. There's a story of a rabbi. They came to him with a question, and he didn't know the answer. And later, they realized that the reason he didn't know the answer is because the question wasn't even a true question. It never existed. Like I'm saying, it wasn't real people dealing with it. So whatever, just to bring out how when everything comes from real Torah, from real Hashem. It's not like just fake questions and fake answers. If there's no realness inside, it doesn't. It's not Hashem's wisdom. Anyway, so okay, so you understand that when we're learning Torah, Hashem's wisdom becomes a part of us. Like it's really, really amazing. Now we learned. You remember Hashem is unlimited. Hashem is infinite. Hashem is very high, very holy, and He's unreachable. Right? Now with Torah, when we learn Torah, Hashem becomes reachable. Hashem is catchable. We can catch Him physically, just like we can catch an object. We're able to catch the wisdom of Hashem, and the wisdom of Hashem becomes a part of us. So Hashem is now reachable, and He can enter us completely. Like we can actually grasp it. It's tfisa, the word tfisa that the Alter Rebbe uses. We can actually catch a piece of Hashem, like we can catch Hashem's wisdom and it becomes a part of us. And also when we catch this piece of knowledge, we're a new person, and we're actually like a new spiritual person. Like we're more spiritual, like we have more of Hashem inside of us. There's an amazing story of a person that was traveling, and there's this thing of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, it's like a wheel that was written in Rabbi Yehuda Nasi that when you leave your house, you don't go back in. So if you actually left for traveling, you don't go back in. Now this person left, but he forgot his passport and he was gonna miss his flight. Like he's in the taxi halfway through to the airport, and then he realized that he forgot his passport and he didn't know what to do. So it was a rabbi. He was a rabbi. And what did he do? He asked the rabbi what to do. He says, I really need to go back into my house, but I don't want to go back into my house. What do I do? The rabbi told him, learn a chapter of Tanya. After you learn a chapter of Tanya, you're going to be a different person. Then you can go back in the house. Because when we grasp this piece of knowledge, we change. We're a new person. So I find this to be very, very powerful. Like all the learning that we do, we're actually changing. We're actually becoming, we have like more of Hashem inside of us. We're catching Hashem. We're connecting to Hashem in an unbelievable way that we can't do in any other way. So just like we said that the mind catches the knowledge, so the mind catches Hashem's wisdom, and also the wisdom catches the mind. So when we learn Torah, when we learn all together, it requires concentration, right? So Hashem's wisdom is catching the person's thinking. Okay, so we're catching the learning, and the learning is catching us, remember? So the same way, we're catching Hashem's wisdom, and Hashem's wisdom is catching our thoughts while we're learning. So we can understand now the special power that the Torah gives to people that are learning the Torah. So there's people that, there's Talmidei Chachamim. Talmidei Chachamim are people that learn all day, like that's what they do. That's what they do for a living, I'm saying, but they learn a lot. We have such people, they learn Torah. You can imagine what kind of level they're at, because how much of Hashem's wisdom they have inside of them. So we have this mitzvah that we need to honor sages. We need to honor people that learn Torah. We need to honor Talmidei Chachamim, even while they're not learning, because Torah is such a part of their wisdom. Torah goes with them everywhere. So there's an expression that says that a Talmid Chacham, like a person that learns, He's a walking Sefer Torah. It's like a Torah that's walking. So of course we have to respect him. Also, there's a huge power to when a rabbi gives a psak. Psak means that he makes a decision of what halacha we should follow. Like if you have a question, the answer that he gives, it's called the psak. The psak that a rabbi gives is very, very powerful. The rabbis are called melachim, like they're like kings, because the power of the psak is so big that it can change. It has a power to change the existence of the world. Okay, like when a rabbi says something, it can change something. I'll share with you a story so you can understand it. But because the rabbi doesn't show his wisdom, he's expressing Hashem's wisdom. The power is from Hashem's wisdom. That's why he's able to give a psak. You understand? Like it's not him understanding and him saying what he thinks, but it's him. He has Hashem's wisdom as part of him, like in a very strong way. There's a beautiful story to explain this. To tell you that it's a true story, I have to tell you names because you won't believe me otherwise. So it's Rabbi Shmuel Lau that says this story. And it was a Chabad rabbi. The Chabad rabbi was living in Leeds, England. His name was Rabbi Angialfi. Anyways, they had a Chabad house and they wanted to expand it. They wanted to make it bigger. The problem was there was a big tree, a 200-year-old tree, right next to the Chabad house that kind of prevented them to expand. It was like really on the way. And the city wouldn't allow them to remove this tree because it was, you can imagine, a 200-year-old tree is very special and they weren't able to remove it. And so this rabbi asked the Rebbe what to do, like if he can remove it, if he can figure it out, whatever. The Rebbe asked him, does this tree have fruits? He says, no, it's not a fruit tree. And he basically asked the Rebbe for a blessing, like what's going to be with this, like we want to expand the Chabad house. Anyways, after he asked the Rebbe, the next day, there was a huge tornado. You can only imagine because we just had it on Shabbos. There was a huge tornado and that tree fell. So it's basically the psak of the Rebbe, like when the Rebbe says something, he said like, okay, I'll give you a blessing. It can make the nature, make the tree go off. Okay. So when a rabbi says something, it's really Hashem's wisdom saying something and Hashem making the tree come off by itself. Whatever, not by itself, but Hashem's making it come off. So it really, when a rabbi says something, because it's all because, I hope you understand now, it's because of the power that he has in him, that he has Hashem's wisdom, he's able to change things. So we're going to see this in the Tanya, all this powerful stuff about learning Torah. He's going to explain that where halacha comes from, that halacha comes from Hashem's wisdom and Hashem's will. And it doesn't matter if there's a case in halacha that's ever going to happen, it's still Hashem's view on a specific situation. It's Hashem. The halacha is Hashem. And when a person learns halacha or learns any piece of Torah, he's uniting with Hashem's infinite and unreachable wisdom. So it's on one hand, it's unreachable, but on the other hand, it can become a part of him. So let's look at it. Okay. Vehine. Now, this halacha is the wisdom and will of Hashem. It so arose in his will that if, for example, Reuven would claim thus and Shimon thus, such and such should be the verdict between them. Even if it never did, nor ever will come to pass that litigation occur over these arguments and claims, yet, since it arose thus in God's will and wisdom, that if one person would claim this way and the other that way, the verdict be such and such. Therefore, when one knows and comprehends this verdict as a halacha set forth in the Mishnah or Gemara poskim, he then actually comprehends and grasps the will and wisdom of God, whom no thought can grasp, nor can any thought grasp his will and wisdom. So only by learning it, you can grasp Hashem's wisdom, except when Hashem's will and wisdom close themselves in the halachot set before us. His intellect is also closed within them, within the divine and the wisdom contained in the Torah. So remember I said that just like we're grasping Hashem's wisdom, also Hashem's wisdom is grasping him. That's what it says here. Okay, so this is it for now. You got the idea, hopefully. Any questions so far? It's clear. Okay. Okay. 1 second. Okay, so now in the last piece that we're going to see today in the Tanya, we're going to see the Alter Rebbe is going to add that there's a bond that's created between the wisdom and the mind. And that bond, when we learn a piece of Torah, that bond is bigger than any bond in the whole physical world. Because when you connect two items, they're not really becoming one. Okay, you're connecting two bones, they're always going to be two separate things. If you connect a ring around a finger, it's still going to stay two separate things. Even when you mix two products in the kitchen or whatever it is, even when you mix them, they're still two things. They're just like around each other a lot. So now when the wisdom goes into the mind, it becomes inseparable. It's actually part of the brain. So when a person understands wisdom, a piece of knowledge, it becomes his own opinion. There was two things. There was the wisdom and the mind. And then, no, there was the wisdom and the mind. And then it became one thing. And nothing can separate. When you think something and you believe it strongly and it becomes part of your thinking, it's inseparable from you. So when a person learns Hashem's wisdom in the Torah, it's a bonding at a very high level with Hashem, because we're connecting to Hashem's wisdom completely. We're becoming one. And that connection can't happen in anywhere else. Like it's the highest type of connection, the highest type of bonding. So let's see this in the Tanya. Here. Now, this is a most wonderful unity. In the physical realm, there is no unity similar or parallel to it. That they should actually become one and united from every side and angle. Yeah, this is it. So you see, it's like, it's the highest form of bonding, the highest form of unity. It's like really, really powerful. There's another story that shows you how when a rabbi says something, it happens. Like it can change the situation in the world. Really cool story. It was Rabbi Yosef Ruzin. He was in a city called Hergeshobi, and he got 2 letters from the city about, it was 2 different invoices of payments that he owed the city. And this person, this rabbi that received these 2 invoices, his whole life was around Torah, okay? And he was learning all the time. When he saw this letter, with these 2 letters, he saw that according to Torah, he only owes the first payment. The second payment, like he doesn't owe it. It's based on all the laws and everything he understands, based on Hashem's wisdom that he understands, he doesn't owe the second amount. And a couple of days later, he gets a letter in the mail that the second payment is actually a mistake and it's canceled. So we see that when he saw that according to Torah, according to the halacha, the second payment is not, shouldn't be there, it influenced the world to realize it and send him this letter. So everything is rooted in Hashem's wisdom in the Torah. Hopefully, whatever, this is like just another story. So to summarize our class today, we learned the value of learning, and especially the value of learning Torah. When we learn a piece of wisdom, the wisdom grasps, like the mind grasps the whole idea until it becomes a part of him, right? And when we learn Torah that comes from Hashem, every single piece of halacha is an expression of Hashem's wisdom. So when we learn Torah, Hashem's wisdom penetrates our brain and becomes a part of us. Okay, this is the summary of what we learned today. Now for a lesson, I think the lesson is really, really powerful. Like after now, you see how so important it is to learn Torah and how it changes our way of thinking, our way of looking at things, because Hashem's wisdom is becoming a part of us. So we learned the power of learning, right? Today, like the power of learning anything. Like it really penetrates who we actually are. So we need to realize what to learn and what not to learn. Like when we realize that when we learn something positive, like we have like positive, or we read things that are positive, it actually designs us more positively. And if we read stuff that are negative, it designs who we are as a negative person. So whatever we read has a huge influence on us. That's why it's so important to check what we're reading, what we're learning, what we're listening to, which books we're reading, who are the people that we're listening to their opinions, because everything all the pieces of information that come to us become a part of us, right? So whoever we listen to, whoever we connect to, like whoever, whatever, we read their stuff or we listen to their stuff, whatever we listen to. So some people will say that the learning doesn't influence me. Like I learn, I read, and then it just stays in the book. No, there's no such a thing. Everything we read, everything we hear influences us and becomes a part of us. So our job is to filter and check what enters us because we want whatever enters us to be like, it's going to design who we actually are, right? So, and it's also with our children. We need to filter and check what education they're getting. What are they seeing? What material they're learning in school? What material they're reading or finding everywhere? And also, all the, like what we learned today is strengthening how much it's so important to learn Torah as much as possible, because we want our mind to receive the best upgrade it can get. Okay, to have like when we learn Torah, we're not just a human mind, but we're becoming a godly mind. We're seeing things from Hashem's point of view, with Hashem's glasses. Like we want our glasses that see the world to have more and more of Hashem's view. So the more we learn, the more we have Hashem's wisdom in us. Whatever we learn, whatever we read, really enters us. So it's like literally everything. Like that's why I feel like, I don't know, I see myself when I read the books that I read, they really affect our way of thinking and our way of looking at the world, right? Everything you read or watch. So we want to read stuff from good people, from people that you think that's who you want to become, or that's who you want to be influenced by. Reading or hearing stuff from people that you may not necessarily get influenced by. If you read or listen to them, you will get influenced by them. Like everything, we need to realize the power of what we're learning, of what we're seeing, whatever enters us. So so this was to explain the power of learning Torah. And next class, we're going to finish this chapter, and it's going to talk about what is more important, what's more powerful, to do the mitzvot or to learn the Torah, like to learn the halacha or to do the halacha. Like after everything we learned about the power of of learning Torah, how much it's connecting us to Hashem's wisdom, and we also learned how doing mitzvot connects us to Hashem. We'll see which one is more powerful.
How can you do the halacha if you don't learn the halacha?
100%. But at the same time, when you see it around, you just see, you just do. But it's true that the more you learn, the more you want to do, and the better you do, for sure. So you're basically saying that learning is a base to doing. But let's say you already know what to do, like you kind of know how to, to eat kosher, and your kitchen is already kosher. Is it more important to learn more about keeping kosher and read more articles about it, or is it more important to make sure to eat kosher? Like which one is more? Has more influence on your connection with Hashem? That's what we're going to see.
It's both of them important.
Both very important, and we'll see which one is more valuable in terms of connecting to Hashem. Whatever you'll see, it's going to be very a nice debate next class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, honey.
Yeah, you're very welcome. 1 second.